Hi everybody, this is Lady Lex UK and this is a Dreams Gadget tutorial. I am going to apologise, it's taken me a long time to do this tutorial. I've been attempting this for days. I've lost my voice at one point. I'm not feeling 100%, so you'll have to bear with me. We're doing movers and outputs, and the next one is the follower gadget. And it's a very powerful gadget and allows you to move objects without having a predetermined idea about where it's going to move to, because it will follow a tag, and therefore you can have an object moving another object in real time as it moves around. So you can have a player controlled object and this will follow it. So for that reason it is very, very powerful, but it's also relatively simple in terms of its application, but one of those gadgets is very complicated in the way it's used with logic. So in order to get the best out of it, you're starting to go into more intermediate logic abilities, I would say. So although the basics of it is very simple, to get the best out of it, you need to be a bit more practiced than just a beginner, so I'll give you that warning. Right, so what is the follow gadget and what does it do? Right, so first things first, attaching it to your object that you want to do the following. As with most gadgets, there on the last page you have a wire option. Whoops, I've got it off the screen. A wire option, affected objects, and you can wire that to whatever you want to do. Now, because there are two objects this gadget needs to know about, please be aware, this is, when it says affected object, it doesn't mean the object you're going to follow. It's the object that's doing the following. So don't make that mistake. This is the object you are going to be following with, not the object you want to follow. There we go. Personally though, I like to stamp the follower to the object. I think it makes it much clearer what is following what, and there it is. It depends on the size of your object though, of course. If you've got a very, very small object, it's probably a good idea to wire it, and then you've got it in a space. And also you might have this inside a microchip, in which case you would have to wire it because it won't be attached to your object possibly. So there you go. There is your follower gadget, and it's now on this object. Let's have a look at the default settings. So the default settings, you've got it's set to follow. I've got a speed of 5 meters a second, and strength and overall damping are both set to 50%. And you've got an option to find a tag. So let's put a tag in. So we're going to pop a tag gadget on this cube over here. And we're going to just call it here. There we go. Just to make it simple so we know where to look. So now we need to enter our tag name. So I'm going to hover over this and press down on the D-pad until it finds my tag. There's only one in this scene, so it's found it there. So that's it. It's now going to follow this tag. So let's have a look and see what happens with all the default settings. There we go. Your block is able to fly. It will travel towards your tag at the speed that you've set, and the strength and the damping that you've set. Let's have a look at those settings. So we've got it set to follow, and we've got it set at 5 meters a second. Now let's see what happens when we move our strength and our damping up and do it again. Do you see the difference? Boom. Let's put it back to its default. It's much faster with these. The strength and the damping does affect the speed, and you don't get that when you move these up. The further you get over here, the less overshoot you're going to get. You notice when you do this, you get quite a lot of overshoot as it adjusts itself and tries to get in position. You'll also notice that the position of this block is dependent on the position of the tag. So let's move our tag. It's still attached to the block. Let's move it to the corner. As you can see. Right, I think you can see clearly now. There is a gizmo inside the follower here. And that is looking for the tag. So if I put this up here and we put that on the tag there. There we go. You can see what it's doing. It's moved itself into position so that the ball of that gizmo there is actually in the very, very center of this tag. If I was to move the tag around my object, there we go. So does the block move. So you may think that the only way to work out the position of your object would be with this gizmo, but there is another option. We have a min distance and a max distance. Now this minimum distance is the distance that the block will get to this situation. Now it's because our blocks are I've got this coming out away from the block. It's going to be a bit difficult to show, so I'm going to put it there. There, and I'm going to put our tag. And you'll notice the tag also has a gizmo. Boom, boom, boom. Right, it's not ideal, but you can see it's placing it there. Let's move it over here. Right, so at the moment the minimum distance is 0, so it's going to move and it's going to get to our block. Let's put the strength and the damping up so it gets directly to our block and stops. There we go. Right, now let's fiddle about with our minimum distance. So we're going to set our minimum distance to 2.5. Now it's stopped. It hasn't gone all the way there. And our gizmo isn't on our tag anymore because this is a different setting that's stopping it from doing that. It's saying stop as soon as you get within 2.5 meters. Do not follow any closer. Do that. Right, now our tag, I've noticed, is no longer on our block. Let's just pop it back on our block. Right, okay, let's see if I can grab it. Let's make that smaller. Oh, it's really difficult. Okay, let's grab it. Right, we've grabbed it now. Let's turn on. Oh, we can't. Okay, right, so now you can see it's moving. Our tag is moving, so our block is moving. It's trying to move along with it, but within 2.5 meters. But look, I can go within it with my tag. It won't move if it's within that 2.5 meters. It will just stay there, and then it will move to try and get within that 2.5 meters after that. And part of the reason is that we've got a max distance of 100 meters. Now this is looking to see if the block is within that that area before it will move. So if you made that a lot smaller, so now we can see 2 trigger zones around our block. Okay. Right, we've turned it on now. You notice it's not following because our block is not within our outer circle, our max distance. If we move my block now, as soon as it hits inside, then it starts to move, and then as soon as it's inside that 2.5, it will stop moving. So it's within this zone here, it will move, and as soon as it gets into that side zone here, it will stop moving, and as soon as we're outside, it will stop following altogether. So you can alter the position of where the follower gets to with the gizmo, with and the minimum distance, and how long they will follow before they stop following with the max distance. Then we have strength and damping for each of the axes. Now, this is where it starts to get a little complicated, and again, we're talking about intermediate and advanced techniques. So this is affecting how strongly it will follow in the x-axis or the y-axis or z-axis, and same with the damping. So it's the same as these, except it's for a specific direction. So if I was to turn off the y strength, okay, and I'll go up, you notice it's not following anymore. It's not following on the up axis anymore. It's not following me up. If I do that, it does. If I do that, turns it off. Whoop. Oh, I've lost the tag again. Yeah, let's just move the tag. There we go. So with it off, it won't move on the Y as I move it up and down. But if I turn it on, it will move up and down, you see? So it's for very specific things. So if you're making your own physics, and then you might need to turn off or reduce on specific axes. But like I say, it's a more advanced skill. On this page, this is where it starts getting that the description doesn't quite match what it does. This says in the description, let's see what it does say. Outputs of fat wire carrying the current position of the target can also be used to input the position of the target using a fat wire. Right, the target, the tag, right? Outputs the current position of the target can also be used to input the position of the target using a fat wire. This is where it doesn't really do what I'm expecting it to do. Let's put that tag back on that block. Boom. Right. Now, here is our tag. This has a scene space transform. And if I stick it in there, we've got translation, rotation, and scale. Translation being the position. So let's and another splitter. Right, so let's 4, 3, 7. Right. Now then, let's make this bigger so it recognizes that. Okay, so we're going to stick a splitter down. And we're going to put some numbers. Four, 3, 7, 0, 0, 0. Okay. Right. Let's move our block in. Now you can see these numbers don't bear any relation to each other. This is not the target position. This is not the tag position. This is the tag position. This is something else. This is different numbers. And once you've reached your target, then it gets somewhat worse because it goes to 0. So let's turn it on. See, it's the same. Aha, now it's the same. 514. Aha, it's the same. However, when we start changing these, you notice difference. It's 514 when it was 0. It's now 0. 514. The target is the same as the position of that tag, which is what you expect. However, as soon as you start setting the min distance to something other than 0, you don't get the result. As soon as it gets within range, it stops sending you the correct signals and starts sending you zeros. So it's a little bit of a weird one, and I'm not really sure what I'm seeing or why it's doing what it's doing, but it isn't the description that I'm expecting. Target position only seems to work if the current position of the target is exactly the same, is a 0 on the minimum distance. So if you want to know the position of your tag, I suggest you literally do it with this, because this doesn't help. This is even worse, found target. Now normally you'd expect it to send a 1 or a 0. A 1 if it's true, and a 0 if it's false. So here's our number. Okay, let's turn it on. 1, 0. 1, 0. As it's moving, it's a 1. If it's not moving, if it hasn't detected anything, it's a 0. If it has detected something, it's a 0. That is next to useless because it's sending a 0 signal if you found it or if you haven't found it. The only time that signal is useful is to tell you that it's moving. So a 1 will tell you it's moving. It doesn't tell you it's found the target, because not finding the target and finding the target is the same number. So not finding the target and not moving is a 0. Finding the target is a 0. Moving is a 1. I think it's designed to do that, but the description suggests found target. Let's read the description. Sends a signal when the follower has encountered a valid target to follow. So it sends a 1 when it's moving. But even when it's found its target and it's moved, it becomes a 0 as soon as it's got there. So bear that in mind, and you can't tell the difference between this number and it not actually having anything to follow at all. So it's a shame that there isn't 3 settings. Haven't found it. Following it, have reached the minimum distance. So the 1-0 for this instance is not really enough, in my opinion, but there you go. So there we are. There is the follow gadget. You can probably tell from my demeanour that I hate it. I don't like it very much at all. I find it very difficult to use because it does weird stuff. But if you master it, then the follow gadget is extremely useful. And like I say, people have done amazing things with it. What I haven't explained to you is flee. This is basically exactly the same but in the opposite direction. So it will run away from the object. So if we set it on flee, are we on? I set it on flee. You see it's off. It's running away. And that will keep going now. That will keep fleeing until it's reached its maximum distance, which we've got set at the default of 100 meters. So it's going to keep running for ages. So you might, if you want to use flee, you're probably going to be fiddling about with this max distance to make it a little bit less. Otherwise, you're just going to have things flying off in all angles for forever. So there we go. There is the follower tag and all of its little tweaky things. Thanks for watching. Hope some of that was useful, and I'll catch you in your dreams.